Greetings, true believers. Welcome back in. I'm Ed Berliner. This is the Talk Sports Network, Talk Sports Florida, and this is Outside the Lines. It has been some time since we have had a chance to visit. However, this is going to be one of those special shows where we don't have to worry about picking a topic because, quite frankly, the topic picked us and basically made it very easy to get to. Let's go ahead and welcome in my buddy, my longtime friend. He is a former player agent. He is an attorney. He is the man who knows all, sees all, tells all, and as I like to say, the smartest man in the room, if you will. We welcome back to Outside the Lines, Joe Casal. Mr. Casal, how have you been, sir?
Ed, how are you? Good to see you again.
It's another day in paradise, my friend. It's been a while since we've actually had a chance to sit here and talk, but oh boy, when I sat and thought about this show, I said we could do 6 hours. It's easy to
It's kind
do.
of wild. Never a dull moment.
But not only that, we could do 6 hours on just one subject because the ramifications of what is going on in the National Football League right now. We've talked about this before in many different senses, but now we finally have somebody stepping forward and could possibly change the face of the National Football League. Let's introduce, because everybody knows we're talking about Brian Flores, the Miami Dolphins, the National Football League, the New York Giants, Bill Belichick, racism, game fixing, and so much more. But let's begin with Brian Flores himself, because it is rare that somebody makes these sort of allegations and the next day is right out there on network television and getting right to it and right to the heart of the matter. In this first episode, this first interview with CBS Mornings, Brian Flores talked about the moment he knew, he says, that something was up. Text messages from Bill Belichick.
I interviewed for the Giants position. I was set to interview on Thursday, the Monday prior. Before I interviewed, I received a text message from Bill Belichick saying congratulations on the Giants, essentially congratulations on the Giants job. There was a little bit of back and forth.
We have the text messages there on the screen.
Yeah, there was some back and forth and
some confusion because
yeah,
you haven't sat down with the Giants yet.
I have not sat down with the Giants. There was some back and forth, and I asked him, "Are you talking to the right Brian?" And as you've seen through the text messages, he was actually thought he was texting Brian Daboll,
who they ended up hiring.
Yes, sir.
So at that point, how did that make you feel, knowing that you were walking into an interview where a decision might have already been made?
It was a range of emotions: humiliation, disbelief, anger. I've worked so hard to get to where I am in football, to become a head coach. Put 18 years in this league, and it was to go on what was going to be what felt like, or what was a sham interview. I was hurt. And,
but you went knowing that you probably weren't going to get it.
I did.
Why did you continue to go?
I think there's still hope, and maybe it's call it the audacity of hope. I have a belief that there's good in people. I just do.
We knew he wasn't getting that job. On the day before that Giants interview, we reached out to you, CBS, to all of you, to start talking about doing this interview today, because we knew he wasn't getting the job. We knew it was a setup. We knew they were just trying to comply with the Rooney Rule. We started drafting the complaint, and here we are.
And from there, things snowballed. It is interesting that in that interview, Brian Flores mentions the Audacity of Hope, which is the title of the book by Barack Obama, which talks about, indeed, of course, the audacity of what he claims to be reclaiming the American dream. So it's interesting that he made that connection. Joe, we have so many different ways that we can take this, but let's, right from the very beginning, before we dig into Belichick, before we dig into Stephen Ross, before we dig into John Elway and so much more, why would Brian Flores lie about something like this? Why would he make accusations such as these, knowing full well the ramifications and the reverberations of such accusations if they are a lie? And why would he blowtorch his entire NFL career after those 18 years if there wasn't some fact behind this?
Well, I mean, I've said to you in the past, there are two subjects that I don't communicate with the majority of sports fans with anymore, and that is NFL hiring practices and sports labor discussions, because fans have lost any sense of reality in discussing those subjects in a constructive way, because they see, they watch hours and hours and hours of sports. They hate players, they hate owners. I mean, they hate coaches. They think of themselves as fantasy sports owners. When I was growing up, I wrote this yesterday. I dreamed of playing center field for the New York Yankees. I didn't dream of owning the New York Yankees. Fans today are fantasy sports owners. They see themselves as owners. They see players as cattle. They see coaches as dispensable parts. If a player does poorly, they're on social media trashing the player because their fantasy points were not sufficient. They view sports, I should say, a lot of fans view sports, not all, but a large number, through the prism of ownership eyes. So when a case like Flores comes up, you say to yourself, the guy's 40 years old. There's a very good chance he may never coach again. So it's clear he's not lying. So if he's not lying, there are only other two options. The other side's lying, or everybody's misunderstanding each other. And so there is more investigative work that needs to be done. The other tip off, and when I always look at these cases, I look at who has the most to gain, who has the most to lose, and then I watch the PR take place. An hour and 15 minutes after the lawsuit went public, the NFL put out a statement and said that the accusations are meritless. Now, if you didn't conduct an investigation to say the allegations are meritless. The next day, you said you're now going to conduct a full investigation, which tells me that the NFL then, after they put out the statement, did a cursory investigation or conversation and found that there is some truth here. And so they backed off the earlier statement. Look, the the Rooney Rule was put in. It was well intentioned. Too many people are circumventing it. Too many people are ignoring it completely. Too many people are saying, "Hey, look, you're not going to fix these problems unless white people get their act together. It's not a minority issue. It's a white people issue." There are 9 openings in the NFL. 5 have been filled so far, all by white coaches, several of whom have never coached in the NFL. You can't tell me that Brian Flores is not qualified for those jobs. He is a 3-year coach in the league. He took a franchise that was in the crapper. He put him in the playoffs last year. He almost put him in the playoffs this year with an owner who's trying to lose games on purpose. So there's clearly things he could do well. Now, does he have deficiencies as a coach? On the outside looking in, yeah. I mean, there's too much
Well, I think we
staff
all do. I
turnover.
mean, that comes down to
But
human nature. He's not the nicest guy in the
exactly,
world if you
again,
talk to
you
people
get
who
down
know
to the
him.
point where African American coaches don't have any breathing room. Jim
That's the point.
Caldwell is the only coach in the last 30 years in which won in Detroit. Can't get a sniff for a job. Marvin Lewis is the best head coach in the history of the Cincinnati Bengals. Won a Super Bowl as the defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. Can't get a sniff at a job.
Wait a minute.
These
Wait,
guys don't have
Eric
a lot of
Bieniemy.
swings.
I mean,
Yeah.
Eric Bieniemy sits out there right now. He has put together one of the finest units in Kansas City. He is well respected by every single one of his peers. And in this current round, granted, Kansas City went deep into the playoffs, but you don't hear anybody saying, why don't we talk to Bieniemy? Now, really, I understand the teams can't come out and say it because that's tampering. But even when he's out of the playoffs, Joe, the guy never he gets a cursory interview, and he's more than qualified for a position.
But again, these are the issues that are being brought up here. I mean, look, there's a legal there are legal questions of whether this lawsuit can become a class action lawsuit. Look, for it to be classified as a class action lawsuit, they're going to have to get other people to sign on to it. So other coaches and other administrators have to sign on to it, or it's not going to be designated as a class action suit. But I think Brian Flores' intention here is to bring light to the darkness, is to bring light to the fact that this process is fundamentally broken. And it's not enough to put flowery sayings in the end zone, and it's not enough to wear a ribbon. It's not enough to do a PSA. We have to do something about it. I mean, there were 32 jobs in the NFL. The NFL is 70% African American. They have one head coach.
But
That's
here's the
not
bigger issue, though.
remotely representative of the business. And and then the flip side of that. Now, the argument you'll hear in reverse is, hey, what if you interview somebody, you fall in love with a guy, and that's the guy you want? Well, but nobody's arguing that. What they're arguing is you're not getting an adequate chance. Look, Brian Daboll may be a very good head coach for the New York Giants. No, he may be a very good coach. He may be Joe Judge. We don't know. But what we do know is that Brian Flores is a more accomplished NFL head coach as we sit today than Brian Daboll. That's not an opinion.
Well,
That's a fact.
hold
Now,
on, hold on.
that doesn't mean that Brian Flores should get the Giants job. It means he shouldn't be part of a sham interview process. You should respect him more for that.
Then let's go to that. This sham interview process. You and I have been around the game long enough. We can only be around the game for 5 years, and we know the truth of what we're going to speak about here. You mentioned it. The Rooney Rule is a sham. It is a complete whitewash. There is no teeth to it. The National Football League hasn't created the teeth for it. They haven't backed it up in any way, shape, or form. The franchises certainly don't. The general managers don't. The people involved, the owners don't. Joe, we've known for decades already, since the inception of the Rooney Rule, that it is completely and utterly useless. So why is it that it has taken this, a supposed class action lawsuit, this explosive issue, if you will, to make people say, oh, well, we've known the Rooney Rule is junk? We all knew. So, I mean, we've all been, the media, the people who cover the National Football League, the executives themselves, they have been letting themselves and every franchise off the hook for decades. Why are we shocked?
Well, I don't think anybody's shocked.
I think fans
I
are
think
shocked. I
what
think
they
those
are.
the knuckleheaded fans are shocked, but we're not.
Well, I mean, but again, these are not fan issues. I think what happens is that we're giving powerless people power. Okay, the fans have no power. I mean, they just don't. They think they do. They don't. Owners own. Fans fan. Okay, and the reality of this is that the NFL owner, look, Roger Goodell's a gatekeeper. He's not Adam Silver. Okay, Dan Snyder's not going to lose his franchise. Neither Stephen Ross. They may, I mean, Roger Goodell's job is to be a gatekeeper. And if he's not a gatekeeper for the 32 owners, the 32 owners will bounce him. Adam Silver runs a league. The owners in that league have entrusted him to run it. They're different businesses. And in the National Football League is riding the wave of the biggest, not just biggest sport in the industry, they're the biggest entertainment property in the business. I mean, they have had the number one show on television for 14 straight years. Okay, it is a $13 billion industry and increasing. And now you've got Amazon and Apple chomping at the bit to throw billions more into the pot. There is an arrogance that goes with that. There is a belief that we are above all of it.
And is it not that arrogance right there that is the reason why the Rooney Rule has been a complete tragic nightmare and train wreck? Because they believe, look, I think the National Football League is the type of individual, if they were a person, who would believe, I can get in my car and I can get behind the wheel of my car. I'm going to go out and hit 6 people in the street. And I'm going to go park my car and I'm going to sit there when all is said and done. Go ahead and arrest me. Do whatever you want. You can't touch me. I'm untouchable. We've heard this from certain politicians before, Joe, and it's that same sort of old, rich, white guy idea that I am above the law under anything that happens. You can't touch me. Same thing.
Well, the NFL is representative of where we are in a society today.
Yes.
I mean, we just had a president who, for 4 years, committed numerous crimes, believes he's above the law, continues to crime on a daily basis, and people cheer it on because it helps them in their war with the other side. We have become a country of voyeurs. What we're doing is we're peering at the actions of others and we're fantasizing what we would do in those situations. We're not a country of rules anymore. We break the rules, and the rules are okay to be broken if the people breaking them are if I'm fans of the people that are breaking them. It's why you don't have any communications with people when you discuss sports labor issues today, because all you hear is it's millionaires and billionaires, and if I played professional sports, I would play for free. They would, no, you wouldn't. You would,
You wouldn't.
you would be pissed off if you were paid $1 million less than a guy of similar skill. Because when you're in that forum, that's how it works. Okay. I mean, that's why I don't have those conversations. I think it's a difficult thing. What we're doing is we're asking 32 white people, men and women, to hire people who don't look like them and act like them. Look, the previous president of the Miami Dolphins didn't hire Mike Tomlin because he said he was too hip hop for him. Draw that
Keyword.
on that
Keyword.
what you will. Okay? I mean, and so it is very, very difficult to envision a situation that these people are going to change. You can't force them to change. What are you going to do? Roger Goodell going to say you have to hire a minority for a position? Can't do that. So what you're doing is you're crossing your toes and fingers that everybody
Hoping.
does right here, and they're not doing that.
And
And
but the
but I will submit this.
okay.
I am not here to say that Stephen Ross is a racist, because he's not. And I think that one of the reasons why we can't have adult conversations on these issues is we immediately brand somebody who does something that we don't want them to do and say they're a racist.
Racism
Stephen
has
Ross
become the
isn't a
knee jerk in our
racist.
society. Not that it's
Right.
worthy. It's worthwhile discussing in just about every case that we've seen it. But people, when they have nothing else to reach for, they go right for racism, sexism, instead of proving it and waiting for it to really be a part of the actual conversation. Because you can say,
Yeah,
and
he's
I'm
not a
going to back you
racist.
up on this. Flores was hired by the Dolphins. Chris Greer is black. And there has been absolutely nothing in Stephen Ross's background in business or the Dolphins that would even indicate that he has been racist. But because this is that issue, it has to be racist. Well, it
He's
might
not
be, but it
he's
could
not a
be something
racist.
else.
What he is a bad
He's
owner.
a bad
He is
owner.
not a good sports owner. He is a phenomenal businessman. I mean, look, what he did with the stadium and what he's doing with the surrounding properties, with the tennis stadium, with the Grand Prix, what he's done there is remarkable. And he's done it with his own money. So nobody can, he didn't fleece a county of $600 million to build a stadium. Okay, he did it himself. He rebuilt the stadium himself. He built the tennis center himself and saved the Miami Open from leaving this area. He's now building a Grand Prix track. He spent $220 million of his own money to build an indoor practice facility for the Dolphins on site. Nobody is quibbling here. The mistake that Stephen Ross made, and he made it, his subordinates did it, but it starts at the top. You don't trash the guy going out the door. It didn't work out for whatever reason. You wish him well. You move on. You tell everyone in your employ, we don't trash this man going out the door. But once you start planting the stories, it's hard to work with.
But if he's such a
Didn't
smart
get
guy,
along
Joe,
with people,
if he's
all of
such
this
a
stuff.
smart
Now, I
guy, why would you do
understand
that? What I mean, look,
because
he's
it was
not an
not a
idiot.
popular move to fire him. He was a popular coach with the fan base here. There are people that disagreed with some of the things that he did, but he was a popular coach. They knew he was dealt a tough hand getting into this job. They were showing strides. But the problem is sports is so much has become of what do I feed my chosen insider info. And people just couldn't wait to trash him out the door. That was a mistake, because if you talk to anybody about Brian Flores, one thing you'll hear everyone agree with, and probably even Stephen Ross, is that he's a man of principle.
He's a stand-up
Now,
guy.
you may not
Everybody says that.
like the principle. And that is another indication of how far we've kind of lost ourselves as a country, that we actually criticize someone for having principles. Like, gee whiz, Brian, what are you doing? What do you mean you can't meet with Tom Brady on the yacht? What do you mean? Yeah, I know it's before the free agent time, but everybody does it. What do you mean you have principles? What do you mean you don't want to help tank games? What do you mean you have principles? What's wrong with
Well,
you?
okay, but
I
but let
mean,
me let me counter that. There are critics out there who are already saying that Brian Flores, with regard to all of these indications about maybe it was Tom Brady, maybe Ross wanted him to throw games, that was a couple of years ago. Well, they say, why didn't he stand up immediately and say something? If Brian Flores is such a stand-up guy, he knew right then and there that he was being asked to throw games, that it could be illegal, and that his job was in jeopardy. Why didn't he just get off the boat, go right out and find the media, and blow this thing wide open then?
well, there's really one reason for that. He's in charge of 53 men. He's looking out for his players. He went back and coached them up and coached them to win games. So
Responsibility.
he's being a leader of men. That's what you hire a coach for. The owners, listen, owners say stupid shit all the time. I mean, it doesn't matter the sport, owners say stupid shit all the time. Okay, if everybody that managed the Yankees in the George Steinbrenner era has a story about George calling down and you gotta do A, B, C, or D, and you go, okay. I mean, the classic story of George calling Gene Michael one day and saying, you gotta trade Bernie Williams. I want him out of here. He's gotta be gone. And Gene Michael had no intentions of trading Bernie Williams. At the time, the Yankees had a call log. That anytime a call was being placed by anybody in their employee, they had to log it. So Michael called every team in Major League Baseball. Hey, hi, how are you doing? But hung up the phone. And then showed George the call log and said, look, I called everybody, nobody wants him. And George says, I told you have to trade him, he's worthless. So, I mean, this is the stuff you do. In terms of the tanking thing, I have a different viewpoint on that. I come from it from two areas. I don't know. It was only 2 years ago that they were printing Tank for Tua t-shirts. Okay? Everyone on all these shows talk about tanking for a first-round draft pick. Okay? I mean, it is almost like the police chief on Casablanca being shocked there's gambling on the island. Everyone talks
Round up the
about
usual
tanking.
suspects.
The only thing that's changed, and this is a big change, is the NFL, like the other pro sports leagues, have completely sold their souls to the gambling apps. And now you've got gambling front and center. It is no longer we're tanking to go get Joe Burrow or to go get Tua. We're affecting point spreads. We're affecting gambling. This has falls under the sports bribery statute. I can assure you nobody was thinking that 2 and 3 years ago, because it wasn't how long ago, Ed, that Tony Romo, when he was an active player, wanted to arrange a fantasy sports weekend in Las Vegas, and Roger Goodell said, you can't do that. Okay, and now everybody's all in gambling. And I said this on your show last year, and I'll say it again. It's wonderful you guys all found the fountain of youth in terms of new revenue. And you're all taking that money and just loving it. But with that money comes strings. And there's two strings here. One, you're going to have to deal with the addiction issues that come with gambling, and having every third commercial that's a gambling commercial isn't the healthiest environment in the world. Two, these gambling houses have things they want too. They want accurate injury information. No more of the Bill Belichick, I don't think he's going to play, but we'll have to see. I'll get back to you on that.
True.
Those are gone. Upper body injury, we'll get back to you on that. That's gone. We want accurate because it affects his point spreads. And the other thing you don't want is you can't tank, because that affects the games. So now you got problems with officiating, you got to clean it up because it affects games. You got problems with teams that want to tank for draft picks, you're going to have to revisit how you draft. You may have to go to draft lottery route. You may have to change what you do, because now we are talking sports bribery. We are talking these gambling houses saying, look, pal, I didn't sign on for you guys to start messing with point spreads, start messing with the on-game, in-game performances.
You're messing with
And
my
this
bank
this
account.
is what comes with this.
You're messing with my
So
casino. Well,
nothing nothing comes clean. You want the money. You want to see JB Smooth's, Caesar's sportsbook apps, sportsbook commercials 9 times on Monday Night Football. There's a price to be paid, and right now it's accuracy and it's legitimacy. And nobody knew this 2 years
so then
ago because it wasn't here.
are you saying then that with regard to all of the gamblers and all of the gambling casinos and all of the gambling apps and everybody that's out there, that they want accurate information? And you're right. Well, they got to be getting it from someplace, Joe. So if they're getting the accurate information where it's not the upper body injury and it actually is a broken third finger on the throwing hand and they can nail it down to that point, and the gamblers claim they can, that tells me and you that somebody inside that organization, whether it's at the management level, the coaching level, the towel boy, the towel girl, the guy who runs the yard markers, or the players themselves, somebody's feeding the gamblers the information somewhere. And that's part of what we've always talked about with regard to getting too tight with the gambling industry, is that sooner or later there's going to be a sieve, and that sieve is going to start affecting games. But isn't that what you're saying? There has to be that upfront, C-level, top of the organization
Well,
information that's getting to the
there has to
gamblers.
be there has to be transparency. There has to be
Well,
transparency
even if there's
in
not
order to
always
set accurate
transparency,
lines.
because even if there's not always transparency, there's people in the back room. Again, it comes down to the kid who's working the towel rack, who is getting paid an extra $300 by somebody to tell him what's going on in the locker room. We all know that this is happening today, and it's been happening for a
Well,
while.
I mean, but really, when it gets down to the competitive nature of the games, more than anything else, you got to know the game's legitimate. You got to know a team's not
Well,
trying to
yeah.
lose intentionally. And so, that's a huge issue. It's not the issue in this. It's the issue that media grabbed onto when they read the lawsuit. And it's something the NFL is going to have to address, obviously. They're going to have to investigate it. But I think it's the price you're paying if you want these partnerships. If you want these gambling partnerships, then you're going to have to be more transparent than you've ever been on a lot of subjects. And I think that one thing the NFL is going to have to revisit, they're going to have to revisit the draft. They're going to have to maybe do a lottery system like we see in the NHL and NBA. There has to be an anti-tanking move here. Because if not, then you're calling into legitimacy the games. And now you're falling under the sports bribery statute. That becomes a bigger problem.
Let's
You're
talk
seeing
about that.
right now, as we're speaking, there's testimony on Capitol Hill about Daniel Snyder and what was going on with the Washington football team.
Commanders.
Okay? Yeah. Now, this is Congress getting involved. This is no longer Joe Lunchbucket being pissed off at his seat at Duffy's that something went on that he didn't like. This is Congress getting involved. If you're the NFL, do you really want Congress involved?
And do you really
Sniffing
want
around
your
sports
antitrust
bribery
exemption to
statutes?
go away?
Right. You're going to have to address this stuff. And look, it's one thing to say, I'm going to cooperate in an investigation. A lot of people say they're going to cooperate in an investigation until they have to cooperate. I will say this. The NFL tried to seize Tom Brady's phone over footballs.
Over
You gonna
airs
see
in
Steve
football,
Ross's
air in
phone
footballs.
over this? Or are you gonna, what kind of investigation are we gonna have here? And that's the thing that I want to know. You're investigating one of 32. Players you don't care about, players are chattel. You shit on the greatest quarterback in the history of the sport and try to turn him into a criminal over inflated footballs. What are you going to do about this? You're going to tell Steve Ross, Steve, I need to see all your emails. I need to, for the last 3 years, I need to see your phone. What you think Steve Ross is going to turn a phone over to the NFL? Is he going to be asked?
He will
Because
after
if
he hits it
not,
with a ball peen hammer. I mean, but
if
let's
not,
talk about that.
if he's not going to be asked that, are
Because
we
to
really
me,
having a real investigation of this, or are we just giving sound bites to try to make it go away? See,
right.
this is where this stuff gets really serious, because it isn't just disgruntled black guy coach. We gotta throw some shit out in the universe to make him look like a bad guy, and we'll come out of this smelling like a rose. It's not. It's a little deeper than that.
Right,
So it's
which
going to
is
be
where we're going.
interesting to
Look,
see what the league does now.
it's bad enough that the National Football League has posited itself as a racist sports organization over the years because of the Rooney Rule, because it's a joke, because the white rich owners are out there and they're basically keeping the black man down however they possibly can. Sure, we'll hire one every now and then. We'll go ahead and make your token every now and then, but it's obvious that there is a streak of racism in the National Football League. But now they have to deal with this issue of investigating one of their own. And to me, if we break this down into the two things that are interesting, one, of course, the rampant racism in the National Football League when it comes to head coaches. But the other side of that is exactly what we've been talking about here, and that is the National Football League dealing with the game fixing issue. That's what this is. If this comes out, this is game fixing. So the National Football League can come all out and say how deeply committed we are to ensuring equitable employment, but you better believe this whole talk about diversity and all the issues about defending against these claims, which are without merit from their statement, isn't even touching at this moment the possibility that there is a fix in somewhere and one of their own fixed the games. Now, to be fair, Stephen Ross came out, issued the statement. Of course, we all knew it. I am a man of honor. I take great personal exception to these attacks. We understand there are media reports stating the NFL intends to investigate. We will cooperate fully, and I welcome that investigation. Baseless, unfair, and disparaging claims. Stephen Ross said everything, Joe, that he was supposed to say in those wonderfully prepared press meetings. And again, the National Football League, backed in part by their own network, the people who are paid by the National Football League. The NFL Network came out, and they're already downplaying. They were right what you said, right on top of it. This could be false. We don't know the facts. We've got to give Stephen Ross the benefit of the doubt. They have their own PR machine that's working every single day out there to cover this up. The NFL right now is looking at the most explosive issue in their history, in my estimation, Joe, because if one of their owners is fixing the games, this sport's off the board. Now, wait, the fans will come back in 10 minutes. We know that. The gamblers will show up and they don't give a damn. But this is going to wreck this sport, and they're not going to investigate it, Joe. You and I both know the investigation of the game fixing, it's going to be a sham, just like the Rooney Rule.
Well, again, they're going to have to answer the complaint. You're going to have to see how this goes through the courts. I mean, honestly, for Flores to have a shot here, you have to get to the discovery phase. I mean, the NFL is going to do everything they can to have the case dismissed, because that's what you do in these cases. If you get to the discovery phase, that's when stuff changes. I mean, they settled a concussion lawsuit when it got to the discovery phase, because that's when you don't want certain things to come out. Okay, and again, this is an issue that when you've talked for years about tanking, it's not a new conversation. We hear this
But it's
every
illegal.
year: tank for a better draft pick. You can't be shocked that all of a sudden it's front and center. It's front and center now because of the gambling aspect to this, because of you having these marketing deals and these business deals with gambling houses that you can't operate this way anymore. It was previous to this, it's a wink and nod. Now it's a little bit more serious.
I still sense a wink and nod, though, Joe.
Well,
It's
can't
a
be a
little
wink
more
and
of a
nod
wink right now,
because
but
they
I
have to
still
answer
sense
a
the same
lawsuit.
thing.
Well, they have to answer a lawsuit. What are they going to do? They're going
Sure.
to say, we're not going to respond? Then you
No,
lose
they'll
the suit by-
respond, but they'll drag this out as
you
far as they
lose the suit
possibly
by
can and as
default.
long as they can.
Well, I mean, they're going to have to investigate it. If they don't investigate it, then Congress is going to get involved, because it doesn't take much. It takes one Congress person to say, you know what, we need to look into this. And then everything changes. I understand people thinking the NFL is all seeing, all knowing, and they can do whatever they want. I heard that with the concussion lawsuit, and
Right.
$1.7 billion later, we saw where that went. I heard it with numerous other things. Okay, I heard it with Stan Kroenke. He'll never lose. He can do what he wants. It's his team. He had to cut a check for $750 million to the city of St. Louis for booking.
Right.
Okay, the NFL's record in court is not good. Getting them to court is the issue. You know, the Flores case has its own flaws from a legal perspective. I don't know if he's going to get it classified as a class action case. He needs more people to sign on to
Which
it.
they claim they
I
have, but we
think,
haven't heard about it yet. But they claim
yeah,
to have
I
other
mean,
people
I
who will
think,
join the suit.
but I mean, it's one thing to say it. It's another thing
Yes.
for people to sign on because people are committing a possibility, I
Harry
should
Carey.
say, of career suicide by signing on. Other people may have they don't care anymore and they're going to do something about it. You know, we talk often about the history of sports labor and sports law, and everybody likes to bring up Curt Flood. People don't realize Curt Flood lost his case at the Supreme Court.
Yes.
He lost his career and he lost his case. He fundamentally changed baseball for the better. And as much as the owners dragged him, the sport became better, owners became wealthier, players became wealthier, the sport became better because of it. I think the NFL is in a very unique situation right now. They own the public consciousness. Gee whiz, almost 50 million
Yes.
people are watching playoff games. They have a real chance here to make things better. Or they can be arrogant enough to say, we don't have to do shit. If they go that route, it's going to get imposed on them. Because one of the things about being the brightest light is that a lot of people want to get their shine on. Do you know it won't take much for a career climbing politician to take on the NFL and have the power of Congress have a chance to beat them? You know, it's like if you're sitting in a room with all these people in the league, you're saying, how much do we want to go through this? Or do we just want to make things right? Let's try making things right. If Ross did this stuff,
I don't
you
see it.
sit him in a room and you say, Steve, you're 81 years old. You already have a designated successor in line. It's time, buddy. It's time to move on. It's time to take the $5 billion you're going to get for it. It's time to go.
But is it not fair to
Or
say,
do you
though?
say, screw you, we're going to fight, and then you're going to have a fight on your hands. You're going to, the law firm that Brian Flores hired is it's not Jacoby and Barnes. These guys are one of the preeminent plaintiff class action law firms in the country. These guys didn't just sign on to a case for nothing. They did their own research. These guys aren't dumb. Do we really want to get into this forum, or do we want to find a way to resolve conflicts? A lot of lawsuits they don't get to trial, they get resolved. There's an opportunity for resolution here. And what Brian Flores wants is an equal playing field. That's all he wants. Doesn't want to get $5 billion and sit on an island for the rest of his life. He just wants an equal playing field. And you know what? Kudos to him. It takes a lot of guts to do what he did. You want to talk? I mean, a guy is a man of principle. It doesn't, he's 40 years old. He's not some 68-year-old guy who's all done and this is his way out the door. The guy's 40 years old.
Granted.
May never coach again. That takes a lot of guts. And
Granted.
if it opens a door to change the way the NFL does business, that will be a win for everybody, especially the NFL.
Okay,
And
let's
we'll see
talk about that
if they
business.
understand that.
Let's talk about that moving ahead. I truly believe, Joe, that if the National Football League is found guilty in the court of public opinion or in a legal sense to have undertaken racist tendencies in their hiring, to actually have been a sham, to do what they can to keep black coaches from getting a chance at being a head coach. If it's proven, and if it's proven that Stephen Ross, or any other owner, if you will, tried to fix a game and tried to alter the outcome of a team, a franchise, a sport, a season, whatever. If those two things happen, Joe, I think the National Football League loses 1% of its audience. It makes a little dent in the can. And the fans will go, oh, wow, that's terrible. Who's in the playoffs this week? Who's coming up on my fantasy team? Joe, I'd like to say that I'm wrong. I hope I am.
But you're
But I
talking
don't see
about
that it will
this.
make a bit of difference
But
to the
you're
NFL.
talking
They'll
about
ride
this.
that wave and get over it.
But it doesn't matter with the fans. It will
But
cost
no,
the
but they'll ride the
NFL
wave and get
$1
over it. They'll
billion
still make
in
billions.
losses. It will cost them probably one or two owners. It will force them to have to hire more minorities.
Okay.
So you want to talk about the cost? The cost is in television ratings. The cost is massive if it comes to that. It completely changes the way the league does business.
But to the fan, I
Just
don't think
like
it'll make a
baseball
damn bit of
changed
difference.
the way they did business. That's the point of this. The point isn't what the fans think. The fans don't
But
matter.
the fans are the
Here's a
money.
secret about sports. The fans never matter.
I get that.
They never matter.
But the fans are the
It
money.
doesn't matter. It matters how the business is conducted. If 5 years
Right.
from now, 13 head coaches in the NFL are minorities, guess what? The league's going to do 20 billion in business, but the league is going to be better for it.
I
If
agree.
5 years
There's
from
there's no
now,
I'm not
every
going to disagree with
coach,
that. The league will be better for it.
right?
There's no doubt. And society will be better for it. It's what's necessary. This ivory tower has got to be imploded from the inside and has got to be destroyed and has got to be torn down.
the
I get
only
that.
way that's
But it
gonna
won't make a
happen-
difference either way to them. They truly believe. Those owners
But it-
sit in those ivory towers right now, Joe, and they think, come on, we'll take a little dent here and there.
But Ed,
Because
it
Amazon and
doesn't
Apple
matter.
and Fox and NBC and CBS will still get in there and Disney will still write us
Ed,
checks.
You're viewing it from the fan. The fan doesn't matter in this. This has nothing to do with the fans.
All I'm looking at is from money standpoint. The money,
but
they'll
from the league
believe that it's
standpoint,
there.
Ed, 4 years from now, if the NFL, 40% of the coaches are minorities, guess what? Brian Flores won. That's what matters.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the fans think.
Right.
It doesn't matter anything else but that. That's the crux of this. The crux is changing the hiring pattern. The crux isn't, oh my God,
Agreed.
they may lose a TV rep. They may lose TV revenue. They're not going to lose that. The idea is to make the league more equitable.
I agree.
And that is going to have to happen. It's going to happen one of two ways. It's either going to be mandated from Congress or it's going to have to come from a settlement or a court opinion.
See, I don't think Congress will go that far. Everybody's in everybody else's pocket. I'd like to think that they would, and maybe there's 10 honest congressmen, but I don't think there are.
Everybody said that until the day those baseball players got marched up on Capitol Hill. And what happened? Baseball completely changed the way they dealt with steroids.
But as you said, football and baseball, two different sports, two different mindsets.
But it takes one guy. They're having congressional hearings today on Daniel Snyder. I was told that'll never happen. Guess what? It is. And that stuff is going to be in the public record. That isn't any more of the NFL saying, you know what, we're not going to divulge what went on with the Snyder case. Well, right now, there's testimony going before Congress on what went on in Washington. That's going to be in a public record. I was told by all of these so-called experts that will never happen. Snyder's got all those congressmen in his pocket. Evidently he doesn't, because they're taking testimony today. So to say things will never happen, this is...
Well, no, I'm not saying that they'll never happen.
The
I'm
NFL
not saying that.
Be worried about this case. The NFL's really worried about this case.
What I'm saying,
okay?
The NFL doesn't give a damn. If the NFL, if you ask them in a private moment, you will get the Uber lords who will say, you know, if we keep doing the same thing that we're doing, and yeah, we take a couple of hits here and there, and we keep moving on, cool. Now, however, wait a minute, let me finish. But if at the same time they say, you know, if we have to change the game, and the game makes us better, and everybody thinks we're great guys and we're making another buck, that's fine too. I don't think they're pushed either way. I don't think they care.
Look, the NFL cares about this, or they wouldn't have reversed their statement in 24 hours. The NFL cares a lot. You know why? Because they know this is Pandora's box if we don't tend to this. We're going to turn around.
I hope you're right.
They know. They're not. I mean, listen, these are smart guys. You start calling the integrity of the games into question, There goes your $1 billion in gambling revenues.
But
Because
haven't
none of
we
your
already
games are going
called
to
the
get taken
integrity
over.
of the game into question over the concussion issue, where they basically let their players go out there and be
That's a
nothing more than
different
rag
issue.
dolls and throw them to the
That's
wind
a,
and let them die?
Ed, that's a different issue. Nobody's
I don't
going
think
out in
so.
a concussion. Nobody in a concussion case is going out and saying we're trying to intentionally lose games.
Well, but
This is the
it still
situation
talks
where
to
we're
their
saying
effort.
we're going out to try to intentionally lose games. Oh, by the way,
I get that.
can you keep the game on the betting line? That's not going to happen.
But I'm talking about the
Okay, I mean,
overall ideal of the league and the way they look at things. I'm talking about how things are looked at from that management and ownership perspective. It's
well,
all
Ed,
sort of the
like
same
I
thing.
said,
We will hide as long as we can.
yeah, but I mean that's fine. But they reversed their stance in 24 hours on this case, a case that was without merit 24 hours ago. Now all of a sudden requires a league investigation. That's the tip-off that they understand the seriousness of this, or they would have just stuck to their original statement. I
But
mean,
then
if they
let's see
get
the
it,
seriousness, and I think this is where we're at right now, Joe. Let's see the seriousness of that investigation, because
well,
their serious
that's
level of
it's
investigation on the concussion issue was absolute bullshit. They didn't give a damn. They still let players die, and they're still letting them
and
die.
and what
So that
happened?
tells you immediately that they don't put everything into these, let's go do an investigation.
But
Okay,
guess what?
now let's see where they're at.
It
Let's see
cost them
what they want to do.
$1.8 billion to take that concussion stance. Do you think the NFL wants to take another $2 billion hit? Not with those owners. You
There's a
think
lot of them
Jerry
that don't,
Jones
but I
wants
think
a
there's
$2
some who are
billion
willing to
hit
gamble.
here? No, they're not going to do that.
I
What
think there's
happens
some
if
that are willing
Caesars
to throw the
turns around?
dice.
What happens if Caesars turns around and says, "You don't want to investigate this? We're not putting NFL games on a board. Have a nice day."
I get it. I get it. There's a lot of
So
ramifications here.
of course they're going to look into it. They
But
have to.
I think there's an arrogance, though, is the point I'm making. There remains an arrogance in the
But the
offices on Park
arrogance
Avenue for the
change just
NFL that
changed
they
in
can get away with
24
it.
hours.
They're like bad
Ed, the
mobsters.
arrogance changed in 24 hours. 24 hours ago, the case had no merit. 24 hours later, they're investigating it. If the case didn't have any merit 24 hours ago, why does it have merit 24 hours later? You know why? Because the legal department sat down with those guys and said, guys, we can't do this. It's listen, this the if the case was a nothing case, the NFL would responded and stuck with their original statement. They get what's going on.
I hope that indeed they do investigate and they do put all their power behind it. But even you said it yourself, the National Football League has history behind them where they lose and they go out and do it again. They lose, they're arrogant again. They lose and they're arrogant again. It's the same thing that they do. It's over and over again with this nonsense. I hope that indeed they have a thorough investigation here, Joe, and they bust the people who are guilty if they do find guilty. I hope they change this league and this game and get away from the racist tendencies of hiring coaches. I hope they get away from it. But they don't have the history right now that shows us that they're serious. And that's my
And
point.
that's the reason why a lawsuit was filed.
Right.
And that's the reason why the lawsuit was filed. They can't ignore the lawsuit.
No, you
They can't say,
can't.
well,
But
we're just not going to respond. We're not
no,
going to do anything.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. They're going to
So I mean, so
respond, but it's part of that
they're
arrogance factor, believing that they can just whitewash this and get away with it.
well, I mean,
I hope I'm
now
wrong.
they're in a position. But again, they reversed their stance in 24 hours. So clearly they know something's up. And if Flores, who has the burden of proof here, if Flores has proof beside his word against Stephen Ross's that he was asked to lose games, it's going to come out. It's not going to get
I get it.
whitewashed.
I get it.
And if that happens, you think the league's going to say it doesn't matter?
No,
That's when Congress gets involved.
they're not going
So
to
I
say
mean,
it
it's
doesn't
like
matter.
they're in between a rock and a hard place right now. The smart money is they settle it. The smart money will say they sit down and they settle it
Okay.
and they draft a new set of rules and they quietly tell Stephen Ross it's time to sell the Miami Dolphins.
But you said that they
If
wouldn't do that.
everybody,
You said they couldn't force him out.
well, they don't have, they can suggest he sell, or all of this has to go public, if they find it to be true.
Right.
And Ross may turn around and say, I don't care if it goes public. I'll scorch earth everybody. Okay, now you got a bigger problem.
But that's my
Now you
point.
bring in, but I mean, but the idea that they're going to do nothing, that's pretty hard to do given where we are today. Now, again, if Flores can't prove his claims, then the NFL doesn't have to do anything. But if Brian Flores can prove his claims, the
Yes.
NFL can't say, well, the NFL, we can do whatever we want. Well, no, you can't. And that's when Congress
Well,
steps in. And look, they did it with Daniel Snyder, and they're sitting in a congressional hearing today, and all of that is going to go public. It's getting
but
tougher and
even
tougher to
you
turn
said, and I
around and
agree with you
justify
on this,
keeping Snyder involved,
that
and Congress is involved in that. If Congress is getting involved in a sexual harassment case, do you not think
which
they
is
would
different.
not get involved in gambling?
I
Of course
understand.
they would.
That I understand. But Congress has a lot of the NFL has congressmen and women in their pocket right now. The
Oh, well,
congressmen
then
and
why
women
didn't they have
all
him
have
in their pocket
financial
over Daniel
interests in the
Snyder?
NFL and those businesses they have to protect.
But I
It's
mean, but
that
why didn't they
vicious
have him
circle
in their
again.
pocket for Daniel Snyder? He's the Washington owner.
And he still
I
owns
thought,
the team. That's my
but I
point.
mean, but no, my point is, there's a congressional hearing going on right now. That was never going to happen.
Right.
How
Well, but
much
whether
longer
it
do you
happens or not,
think that they can keep that they can keep him in that chair if this hearing continues in the pace it's going with all of these people coming forward? Gets tougher and tougher to do.
but I'm going to bring
I
this
mean,
down
could
then
they
to
do it? Sure they could.
another
But
issue which we've glossed over here. And we just touched on it at the beginning of the show here. If indeed there is evidence that shows that Stephen Ross was involved in fixing games, which is basically what we're coming down to. If he's going to tank, that's game fixing. If there's evidence, if it's proven, you and I both know that the National Football League must take the franchise away from Stephen Ross. They can't just tell him to sell.
well,
They got to
I
take it away
mean,
from him.
the reality of it is, if that's proven, it's over. I mean, that's it. He's done. Now, there's different ways he can still be done without it ever being public. He already has a designated seller
Yes.
of the franchise. You know, if this thing progresses, he could all of a sudden say, I'm 82 years old, I'm getting divorced, it's time to kick back. Listen, they got rid of Jerry Richardson in pretty short order. And that guy had the lineage of being an NFL former player and then owner. But when it was time for him to get out, they got him out. If they want Stephen Ross out, just like if they want Daniel Snyder out, to get him out. Now, obviously, Snyder comes with a different set of receipts.
Correct.
Because he has receipts on everybody. And that's the reason why he's been allowed to stick around. But that congressional hearing may change things. It may not, but it may change things. When you start talking about gambling, that's a different animal, okay? That is the specter that hangs over every sport. And you're only as good as the games are being felt that they're legitimate on the field. And if that gets
Absolutely.
involved, they're in big trouble. So I think the league will always talk tough with regard to
That's my point.
lawsuits. Talking tough and then doing something are two different things. Their track record in court is terrible.
Right back to
It's
my point.
awful. But I mean, but the track record's awful, and they know that. They also have never had to deal with a gambling case in the NFL. Last time they dealt with a gambling case, they threw Paul Hornung out of the league for a year for betting on games. Okay, they have not had to deal with this. And
Right.
so, again, the onus is on the plaintiffs to prove things. It's not enough to say he told me this and they don't have any other witnesses. That's not going to fly. Okay? If there are other witnesses, that's a different conversation. So now we're going to see it play out. But if you're the league watching this from somewhat of a distance, it becomes risk versus reward. What's the reward of having this guy still in the league? What's the risk of keeping him in the league? And I think that the people that matter in the league, which are not Roger Goodell, Jerry Jones, Robert Kraft, Those are the people
The
that will
people in
determine
power.
Stephen Ross's
The
fate.
people in power.
If,
And it is not a commissioner.
yeah,
Correct.
if it's worth it or not. Right now, it's too early to say because right now you can, a lot of people can allege things, you have to prove it. But if Flores has receipts, if he has other people that will back up what he's saying, now they got a real problem on their hands. And it's going to be interesting in a league that is not known for its diplomacy, how they're going to navigate all that.
But would
Because
you
that's
not
not
say,
what
as a
they're known
lawyer,
for.
and again, I'm going to ask you to put your lawyer hat on here for a moment, that Brian Ross claims that Stephen Ross told him that he would pay him now, and I'm just kind of putting sentences together here, I don't have the exact words, that he was going to pay him $100,000 if he helped him tank games, that he was going to give him money. Would you not agree from a lawyer sense that if Brian Flores says that in a one-on-one conversation, that's hearsay? I mean, he can say that, but he's got to have
Well, there's
some
all,
sort of
there's
corroborating
context,
evidence, or
there's
he's got
all
to have
kinds of stuff.
witnesses, or he's got to have somebody who heard something that would lead to that, or that would intimate that that statement was actually made. Correct?
Right. Yeah. I
Right.
mean, absolutely. I mean, it's not, I mean, and there's also context. What if he was joking? What if he just said,
Sure.
geez,
Which he'll
so
probably
again,
say he
he's
was.
going to have to prove, he's going to have to prove that allegation, and he said, their side is saying that they have proof. So the answer to that is in questioning their side. The answer is okay. At the appropriate time, you're going to have to deliver that proof. Again, we get back to what I said early in the show. What's the incentive for Brian Flores to lie? He is, in essence, blowtorching his career. What is the point of him lying about this? And then the other side of it is, if you're going to put that in, look, there isn't a lawyer in the world when somebody tells you that, the next question isn't who else can back that up for you.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, it isn't like, oh, Brian, okay, they're not stenographers. Okay. They're not just writing it down and that's it. The questions probably came from his own lawyers. You have anybody else in the room when that was taking place? I mean, you have anybody that's going to back you up? I mean, so again, we only know what's public right now. And what's public is the complaint.
Correct. And usually
And
what
what's
is made public
public,
in a case like this is
right.
is infinitesimally
Yeah.
small.
And what we can ascertain through the reactions of others to the complaint. And what I saw in the league is a league that within an hour and 50 minutes of the complaint said it was without merit, and 24 hours later said there's an investigation. It took Steve Ross 2 days to come up with a statement to say he's going to cooperate in an investigation. So all of a sudden, from something that was completely without merit, there's now an investigation, which tells me that there are people who also heard Ross tell Flores that, or there's a paper trail,
But which
or they
also
sent him an
tells me
email
that
or
the
something.
National Football League is just like so many other companies where they have somebody involved in a PR sense who immediately spits out a statement that wasn't approved by everybody up and down the line. So they say, okay, let's go ahead and issue another one. We're fine. That happens all the time. I don't know how much of a smoking gun that is, though, Joe. I'm not, no, with my
It's
knowledge of
not. It's
public
not so
relations
much
and
a
media
smoking
relations,
gun.
I'm not
It's
that convinced.
it's an understanding that there's more to it than here, or they would have just stuck to the original statement, and they would
Yes
have
and
just
no. Or
said, you
that
know
there's
what, the
somebody else
case.
comes in
The
and says,
NFL
cover your
gets sued
ass.
all the time, and there's cases without merits, and they don't even give it any attention, and they move on. And you had guys that were suing over ticket snafus at the Super Bowl years ago, and they didn't give it without merit. It went away. This is a little bit different, and again, it speaks to the integrity of the game. That's one
Understood.
you can't hide from. Okay, that's one you're just not going to bury. And again, I keep saying it because it's true. Flores has the burden of proof here. Okay, and he's got an uphill climb. I mean, I have my doubts that his case is even a case that has merit. We'll have to see. He has to bring more to the table than just his word, because he could be the
Right.
most
We get
honest
that.
guy in the world, your word against somebody else isn't going to fly here. But my guess is, given the legal power he has behind him, those guys just don't take those cases for nothing. They don't
Okay,
take those cases because they want PR.
right. Yeah,
This is a high-powered law firm, and this is a law firm that does their own due diligence
that
before they
believes they
even
can
file the
win, because
case.
if a law firm of that repute doesn't believe they can win, they'll never take it.
They're
We
not
do know
taking
that.
it on.
But let me get to this briefly. I have to touch on this before we go. We're way over, but I really don't care, because this is the one thing this is another issue crux that we're involved in here. Is it not fair to say that the text messages from Bill Belichick, which are sort of getting buried in all this a little bit, you see that kind of going under a little bit, but that is a smoking gun? Because, first of all, I can't believe Belichick was that foolish, because he's usually not that foolish about anything at all, and he obviously made a ridiculous mistake. But does that not point to immediately, if Flores is talking about sham interviews, racism, blacks not getting a fair shake, that set of small text messages is the thing that could unravel the league in this case?
Well, it's the reason why over 65-year-old people shouldn't text.
Stay away
First of
from
all.
social media, guys. It doesn't work for you.
Secondly, it's
That's right.
the reason why one of my old and departed gangster clients by the name of Peaches Adonofri would never speak on the telephone. If he was alive today, would never text message. He would write down everything on a piece of paper, send it to the person. Have his nephew run to the person in the store next door to read it, bring it back, tear it up, and throw it out. I mean, it's like, geez, wrong Brian on the text
But
message.
is that
I
not
mean,
the physical evidence that you need? We've talked about
well,
the
it's
Rooney Rule being a
evidence.
sham, but we've never really had
It's
physical evidence. It's all been hearsay. This is now evidence
it's
that
it's
you are being
it's
called into an
evidence.
interview and you had no chance.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the difficulty with that is that, and here's where the NFL will argue. When Bill Cowher retired, Russ Grimm was really going to be the head coach of the Steelers. He was the guy that everyone
Right.
knew was going to get the job. The Rooneys had to comply with their own rule, the rule they created, and they brought in the secondary coach of the Buccaneers, a guy by the name of Mike Tomlin, and he blew him away. And the Rooneys, if you know anything about the Rooneys, you know that they're among the most loyal people on the planet. They are really not just NFL royalty, they are good people. And they have Russ Grimm, who's been part of their group for a long time. And they go, well, we kind of promised Russ the job, but we can't give him the job now because this guy is exactly who we want. And if you look at the Rooney's history in the last 55 years, they've only had 3 head coaches. So, I mean, these are people that when they make a commitment to somebody, they stick with them. And they had to have the difficult conversation, and they hired Mike Tomlin. And 15 years later, obviously they made the right decision. If you're Brian Flores, and this is where African Americans and minorities have such a difficult time with this. Even though it's a sham interview, you're going. Because if you don't go, you get the reputation
Right.
being difficult,
Right.
of being, I mean, Jim
Something
Harbaugh
that in
got on
many
a plane
cases a white
yesterday.
coach would not have to endure.
Jim Harbaugh got on a plane yesterday to go to Minnesota to interview for a job he was expecting to get. He wasn't going there just to meet the Wilfs and go to Manny's for a steak. I mean, and he did it on
Good steak, too.
National Signing Day. So basically, he was giving the University of Michigan the finger going out the door, going to Minnesota to get coronated. Didn't hire him. He had to go back to Minnesota. You know what Jim Harbaugh experienced yesterday? A sham interview. You know what he experienced? He experienced what probably 100 African American coaches in the last 10 years have experienced. You know what the difference is? Jim Harbaugh has a $7 million a year job to go back to with a big social media headline welcoming him to a job he never quit. Welcomed him back. It's $7
See,
million a year. African American coaches don't have that luxury.
you're right. You're
If
right.
Brian Flores called up the Giants and said, it's come to my attention that you're going to hire Brian Dable, doesn't matter if I show up or not, go find another minority to interview to satisfy the Rooney requirements. I guarantee you somebody from the Giants would have leaked to one of the New York tabloids how difficult Brian Flores is.
Yes.
So you have to go there, and you have to hope to change minds. You have to hope you Mike Tomlin the interview. And that is the stuff that Brian Flores is trying to change with this lawsuit. And that's where we're at. And
I hope there is change. No, I hope there is change.
That's where we're at with it.
What you and I have touched on, and we're going to have to do this another time because it's great. It's a great story to tell and great issue to dig into, is how there are certain members of the South Florida media who will kiss the ass of the Miami Dolphins on any given day, 25-8, whatever it is. They'll go back and forth because that's their money, and how they helped kick Brian Flores out the door, how they helped take everything from the head of the organization, and how they made him look like a bad guy and all this. He doesn't like Tua, and he can't stand Tua, and he's a nasty guy and all this. And they were all part of this. It's all part of a conspiracy to help everybody down the road. They did it in South Florida. They've done it every place else. And how the National Football League now, with the NFL Network, and I've watched it in the last 24 hours, Joe, and you can see them. There's all their paid announcers and all their paid commentators. Well, you know, the NFL actually is really good on these things, and the NFL really wants to make sure that the black man survives and thrives. Come on, bullshit. They're all doing it because they're all just part of the same game. They're all part of the same.
Well, we're seeing that. We're seeing that in Major League Baseball with their network. They got rid of Ken Rosenthal because he had the audacity to provide balanced coverage on the labor dispute and the lockout. I mean, what did you think? You're not getting journalism from. You're getting entertainment from MLB Network and NFL.
You're not getting anything
Network.
fair. You're not getting fair. You're not getting that fair and balanced.
But it's not a journalism house.
Right. It's not.
I don't know anybody who thinks it is. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. It just shows you the uphill battle that someone like Brian Flores has when you take on the league, and makes me respect him more. Because it's not like Brian Flores doesn't know what's going on. He's a sharp guy.
Sure.
But this is the battle. And it's the reason why I have so much respect for him for doing this. Because he's not doing it for himself. He may not benefit from this, just like Kurt Flood didn't benefit from him taking on Major League Baseball. You know?
Brian Flores, in 20 years, Brian Flores could go down.
As my late father would say, he has brass balls. You know,
he could, as I said, in 20 years, we could be looking back, and Brian Flores could be the guy who will be talked about in Kurt Flood ideals in helping to change the game. But
yeah, I just hope that he's treated better than Kurt Flood was treated.
That's not hard. That wouldn't be hard. The way Kurt Flood was treated, it wouldn't be hard at all. And a reminder that, of course, we're at the early stages of this. So we got a long way to go, and we're going to have to do this again. A reminder that if you want to get a hold of Joe Casale, it is easy. All you have to do is go to Facebook at Chef Casale. It is the only place that Joe Casale does anything except here. So he doesn't have a blog. He doesn't have a website. I know you, and that's what you said. Facebook, Facebook is your blog,
that's too much work.
I know.
That's too much work.
It is for those of us out here still trying to make things work and pay bills and stuff. We got to go out and we got to find that stuff on a regular basis. It happens all the time. Joe, always a pleasure, man. Let's not let so much grass grow under our feet next time. Let's come back and do this again, because this is going to go on for a long time, and it's going to make for great debates and great stuff. Pet the puppy, and give Carol all my love, will you please?
Yep. See
All
ya.
right, buddy. Take care. That's Joe Casal. Don't forget, you can catch the show again at Talk Sports Network. You can get a hold of me at Berliner Speaks. And also, as we go back and we go around and we do all the shows, catch all of our shows at the TalkSportsNetwork.com. Find us there. For Joe Casal, for Tasso, for my kids in the background who are busy barking during the whole show as well, I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Until next time, rock on, true believers. See ya.